Thank you for listening to WJ Talk, the Waterways Journal place for conversations that move the marine and waterways industry forward. Today, you'll hear from Dave Murray, staff writer for the Waterways Journal, along with Jason Aristides, CEO of OpenTug, the sponsor of this episode. OpenTug is a technology company purpose-built for inland and coastal barge logistics. Its flagship platform, Barge OS, enables end-to-end voyage management, bringing visibility, predictability, and financial control to every stage of the barge lifecycle. Once again, thanks for listening.
Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, May 13th. This is Waterways Journal Talks. My name is David Murray. I'm a senior editor, and we're very privileged to have with us today Michelle Ramsden, who's a special counsel at Jones Walker, which has one of the largest, if not the largest, maritime practice in the country. It's a name that's well known to everybody who does business on the inland waterways. And Michelle is a special counsel with a focus on commercial transactions, privacy, cybersecurity, and AI, topics that engage all of us, affect all of our lives in the legal sphere and on the waters. So Michelle, I think we'll start. I recently read a paper of yours where you talked about the necessity of using what you call bridge discipline to govern AI, and I was intrigued by what you meant by that.
Yeah, I'm pulling that concept sort of as shorthand for bridge resource management, being the protocol that governs decision-making aboard a vessel, and the need to have things like defined roles and mandatory communication protocols, cross-checks, escalation paths. And, in the maritime industry, that structure helps prevent single-point failure under pressure. And then sort of conversely, in the world of AI governance, we have a similar approach that imposes a discipline on these high-stakes, technology-driven decision-making tools. That it's the idea that even with advanced automation, safe operation really depends on having these clear roles and a shared situational awareness and human accountability. I think most AI risk emerges quietly. It's little misreads that snowball into more systemic problems, like bias that can undermine the effectiveness of a tool or cause real reputational harm or financial harm to an organization. So this concept of sort of translating bridge discipline into the technological area is what prevents these quiet errors from becoming the larger types of risks.
Of course, on bridges, you usually have one person in charge, that's the captain. And so how does that translate into the shoreside organization?
Yeah, so, this is something that's been interesting, is exploring the accountability structures that come with AI and how you can't turn over accountability to the technology. So there still are humans who are responsible for making sure that the implementation of these technologies, no matter the context or the particular use case, are done in a responsible way. There's still going to be humans that are responsible for making sure that all of the safety mechanisms and all of the controls that help prevent AI from causing these sort of snowball effects are in fact in place. So I think we say in the legal space you treat AI kind of like an intern that is capable but shouldn't really have autonomous authority in your case. In the same kind of way, you can treat AI like a crew member that is helpful, but isn't the one making all the decisions. There's still a human that's accountable for the decisions that you're using the tool to make.
You talked in that same paper about the 4 factors involved in AI: govern, map, measure, and manage.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that for us a little bit?
Yeah. So I can kind of explain where that comes from, and then I can walk through those a little bit more with you. So the 4 functions are derived from the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology's AI risk management framework, which is publicly available. It's a very extensive AI risk management guidance document. So AI law and regulations have surged rapidly and then kind of pulled back over the past few years as a result of economic inputs and business realities and many different things. But there's been throughout all of that a core set of governance frameworks in the ISO standards and NIST AI risk management frameworks that have remained constant and reliable foundations for actually building effective governance within an organization. So the 4 functions are sort of a way to break down an approach to AI risk management that feels more manageable. I know that, looking at how an organization uses AI can be really overwhelming. You can you get the feeling that you need to get your hands around it, or you need to understand exactly how you can govern it. But it's really a lot more iterative than that. And so the first step, I guess, is the first function of govern. And that's really where you set the rules of the road for an organization. You can cultivate a culture of risk management by establishing organizations' risk tolerance, accountability processes, clear policies for what's an acceptable use of AI, and setting up organizational oversight functions. This is where you can define what your organization really wants to do with AI. Should you be using it, and under what conditions? Where you can say who is that person that's accountable for AI decision making. It might be a little bit different in different contexts, but have a structure for that. And then you can start integrating different cross-functional stakeholders like legal or IT or compliance that can help with the governance there. But it really sets up thresholds for when you want to deploy AI and how you want to use your policy to guide your organization's implementation. That's the stuff that is really critical before I think you start moving into anything else. It's just understanding where your risk tolerance is and where your governance tolerance is, frankly, because your organization might not be willing to shut down tools in the middle of using them, and just kind of understanding, realistically what you're willing to do. The next one, map, is understanding where AI lives in your organization. That's understanding what the purpose is of each particular use case, what types of risks you might have, where the data is coming from, and who the AI might impact. So you're understanding then what tools you have. And that might be more than you think, because in a lot of organizations, people are using AI that isn't necessarily vetted all the way up through an organizational chain. So if they're at their phone and they're putting something in the chat GPT, could still impact the organization ultimately. So you kind of get a map going of that, and you see where these tools are being used, how they're being used, where your organization is dependent on like a third-party platform. This kind of helps with the visibility problem that I think a lot of organizations have, where it's hard to govern something that you don't know you're doing. And so this allows you to understand when and where these tools are being used, how they might impact people, how other systems are connected. Are you connected to GPS or to insurance processes, or their impacts to communities nearby, and understanding kind of what the overall system is in which AI is fitting. And then you've got measure. I can talk about this all day, so I'm trying to get through it. But measure is where you evaluate the performance and the risk and the impact of your tools. This is where you start testing and making sure that the tools are doing what you want them to do, that they are accurate, that there isn't bias, and that can be introduced in all sorts of different ways, and making sure they're reliable and they're still doing what you signed up for them to do, and that all of the outputs you're receiving are safe and are reliable, and that they're aligned with your business's risk thresholds. This turns AI, I think, from like a novelty tool into something that you can actually audit, and you can assess, and you can make sure that you are not creating safety issues for yourself. And in AI, that's not only physical safety issues, but the way that data is used can have impacts in a variety of ways. These are things like tracking metrics, making sure that everything is working, making sure that your tools function in different contexts. So if there's unpredictable factors like weather, even, that things are still working properly. And then it's helpful because you want to make sure that your people can actually use the tool that you have, and that it's actually, worth your investment. And then the final one is manage. So that's the sort of ongoing, continual oversight of a tool. So that's where you can implement responses to the risks that you've identified. That's where you can correct for any errors that you find. And that's a forever exercise, I think, as long as you're using the tools, that you have to kind of keep coming back and making sure that the thing that you're doing is helpful, is working, making sure that you have the proper contract protections and things like that with your vendors, making sure you're updating your tools appropriately so that they are functioning correctly, and making sure your data is still accurate that you're feeding into the tool. and that you have plans for if there's an incident, if something goes wrong, that you have escalation mechanisms and that you're taking appropriate actions. Make sure that your governance plan works. So if you've said, we're going to shut down these tools if they don't work and you're not doing it, then you need to figure out what you are going to do and adjust for that. So it's just kind of this, I could talk about it again for, all day, but it's really a way to break down this very multifaceted governance process into 4 steps that you can approach sequentially and kind of bite off one chunk at a time.
These 4 functions or steps relate to different personnel. Obviously, the person that's ultimately accountable, presumably the operator or the president of the company, who has all these subordinates. But can you have one subordinate who does the map function, another one who does the measure function, and they kind of check each other and vet each other's work?
Yeah, that's right. That's the kind of thing that you're seeking to establish up front with govern is who's actually going to be accountable for which piece of this. Of course, ultimately, like with anything in an organization, someone ultimately is accountable for all of it. But you want to make sure that you are picking the right people in your organization to actually handle the issues. So there might be something really IT heavy, and you don't want to assign a lawyer to do the math behind the AI and make sure that it's all checking out. And it's the same thing here. Is you want to make sure that whoever is actually using the tool is responsible for their piece, and whoever is in charge of them is responsible for making sure they're trained. And it kind of escalates from there.
So not a lawyer doing math, but maybe a third-party vendor of IT services.
Sure.
You have to take their word that their product is going to say what it does. And I guess that gets into the contract language you use when you're hiring them. And that's where somebody like you comes in.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We see a lot of, very sophisticated, technologically forward organizations that sometimes haven't thought about these things. It's absolutely critical to make sure that you know what's happening with, first of all, your data. You might not want your organization's data to become part of the training model. You might not want it to pop up in somebody's ChatGPT search, a couple of months from now if it's sensitive information about how your organization operates. You want to make sure that if there is an incident that is caused by something on the vendor side, that your organization isn't stuck dealing with, all of the ramifications without any support. So those are the type of things that you really want to be thinking about, is just making sure that you have sort of conscious and careful review of all of these engagements. You really can't just assume that the marketing language on an AI tool's website is going to stand throughout your use of the tool.
Well, as an attorney who works with contracts, Michelle, I want to ask you, are there issues with contracts with third-party AI vendors that are different from contracts with suppliers of other services? Are there special issues you have to look at? Are there special precautions you have to take?
I think the thing that's unique about AI is the way that risk can be magnified. So you might have, in any type of contract for a technical tool, you might have a risk that there will be data loss or something like that. But with AI, because there are decisions on decisions and things are really rolling forward quickly, and the tool is making, building in a lot of assumptions based on training data and all of these things, a minor error can become a major issue really quickly. And so you really just have to be a little more careful than you otherwise would be in making sure that you have these sort of thoughtful provisions built into contracts, even things like making sure that if you have IP or some sort of intellectual property or some sort of protected information that your company is responsible for, that it doesn't spiral out of control and become a bigger reputational issue that then you have to deal with later. So it's not that the risks are all that different from things that you would have perceived before. It's just the magnitude with which they can become a real problem very quickly.
And maybe the speed.
Yeah. You can tell just by using an average online tool that, you put in a little bit of information, you're going to answer very quickly. That's very robust. And that's based on a lot of assumptions and a lot of training data. And if something in there is wrong, I think I wouldn't be the first person to have used a tool and gotten something out that I knew didn't look quite right. And, if I had relied on that, like a lot of people do, it could really have put me in a bad situation. And that's the case in every industry, I think.
I know a case of, it wasn't in the maritime world, but an organization that paid a vendor like $10 million up front for a software suite, and the company declared bankruptcy like a week later.
Yeah. There are a lot of instances where we've seen things go wrong. I think luckily we're learning how to mitigate those things, and it's all coming back to that set of 4 functions of making sure that somewhere in those 4 functions you've accounted for all of the things that we've talked about, all of the sort of escalations and all of the data issues and all of that is within this risk management framework that's been put out by NIST as something to look at. The framework itself is like hundreds of pages, so I don't expect anybody to go through and read it with a fine-tooth comb and understand it, but hopefully we can, work with some organizations to help them break this down and make it a little bit more manageable.
But I know that attorneys themselves use AI to mitigate risks and to scope them out. And I just covered a conference. Were you at GNAPFA?
No.
But you know what it is, right? In
No,
New
no.
Orleans, a conference of maritime attorneys, and they had a panel presentation on AI, and they talked about the different ways that attorneys both use and protect against AI.
Right. Sorry, I lost your sound for a second there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're okay.
Without disclosing any privileged information, do you have any stories relating specifically to towing in barge companies or inland terminals or anything like that would be relevant for our audience?
I can give you some that I think they're a little bit more broad than that. We can try to get some more examples together in a written format for you. But from the maritime context, there are a couple that I think are illustrative. And then there's one from my own background, which is not as maritime focused, but is pretty prevalent, I think. So from the maritime context, there, even as far back as 2019, so this is 7 years ago now. So this AI has been kind of developing over the past decade. But there was an incident, a spoofing incident near Italy where AIS signals were falsified, which caused vessels to appear to be in places that they were not. That's just a very simple example of not trusting the data that you get back from your AI blindly. If you're relying on this information as a ground truth for navigation, but it's not authenticated and it's not correct, it can become a real issue. These systems rely on data inputs that can be poisoned, can be manipulated, and it results in very confident but incorrect decisions, and can show that even the core navigation data that was used can be manipulated. There's another that's more cyber focused. There was a ransomware attack that halted cargo operations for 2 days in Japan in 2023. This caused route changes, delays, near collisions, and it goes to show, I think, that cyber incidents don't always stay digital. So they have real world, sometimes very physical impacts that can impact, the movement of cargo, physical safety of crew, and then also cascade across the supply chain and cause real reputational harm for organizations that haven't accounted for these issues. So this kind of goes to the concept of algorithmic amplification, which is where AI is embedded in any sort of operations and making decisions based on impacted data. You can have these system-wide failure modes and cascading effects from just a single smaller compromise. And then from my own background, so I'm coming to Jones Walker from the Department of Justice, where I did privacy and AI governance, and everybody will be familiar with Clearview AI. And so that was a tool that built a massive facial recognition system by scraping images off of social media and public websites without individual consent, and then converted them into biometric identifiers, and then allowed users to upload a photo. In our case, it was law enforcement to upload a photo and identify somebody almost immediately. And it was sold or provided as a pilot, which meant that people didn't have to go through formal contract mechanisms to give it a shot and just try it out. And those pilots became years long in some cases, and never kind of went through formal governance mechanisms. And so it goes to show that sort of outsourcing this type of work to vendors can really dilute the constraints and the accountability that an organization has built in, because that stuff was built in at DOJ had those contracts gone through the proper channels. And that can raise legitimacy concerns for outputs. So if your organization is getting outputs from a tool that's built on data that wasn't properly sourced, or doesn't have proper safeguards, or you just haven't contracted for and haven't built in liability provisions for, it can cause some pretty severe reputational harms. And you don't want to be the benchmark case for the misuse of AI. So it's something to think about. Even outside of the maritime context, there are examples that really go to show how serious these impacts can be.
One of the examples at the conference I just covered that was used or cited, they had a magistrate judge who was on the, I think, Texas Supreme Court. Now he's on the Fifth Circuit. Mm-hmm. And there was an example of a murder trial in Texas where a judge allowed the defense team to create an AI-generated avatar of the victim who was dead to give an impact statement at the sentencing. Of what his friends and family thought he would say.
Yeah.
And most of the attorneys there were opposed to that.
Yeah, that's a really difficult situation because I assume there was an intent to try to help, a family feel heard, but at the same time, that is absolutely not something that man said, and it's really difficult to kind of navigate some of these waters. I think in that case, it goes back to the concept of a victim impact statement, which is already something that happens at trial where, the man's family can speak about the impacts and can speak about what they thought, he might have thought. Without doing that, I think that kind of pushes right up against a line that a lot of us are uncomfortable with. But there are a lot of different and unique contexts where we're seeing these sort of edge cases.
When I hear you talking about lines of authority and who's responsible, it makes me think that it's ultimately the law that's going to set the guardrails and decide where these go. Because as these new tools develop, something goes wrong and a case happens, and the question is going to be asked, some human has to be responsible. Who's that going to be? And then that case will decide that, and these guardrails will gradually get established. It's too bad that we have to wait for things to happen. But
yeah, I think that one benefit of being kind of in the position where we are, where the law isn't clear yet, is coming from a government and regulatory background. I know that in a lot of these rooms, people are looking to what industry is doing as examples of what does and doesn't work. And there is real opportunity for people who want to start implementing governance based on these established risk models to start testing things and see what actually works for their organizations and potentially become, kind of the leaders in implementing this type of governance. There really is, there's a lack of clarity from the law, but there is a lot of opportunity to help shape something that works for organizations in real time.
But AI can also be used to model these scenarios that you've been talking about and to protect against them, right? You can ask your AI, let's assume this type of data leak or this type of reputational harm, and then help us devise strategies to prevent it.
Yeah, there are also, for the steps that I talked about, there are a lot of tools that can be used to implement different pieces of that might be really difficult, particularly for like a smaller organization that doesn't know how to implement AI testing. There are AI testing tools that are AI. And of course, in that case, you very much have to be conscious of the contracting and making sure that liability is provisioned appropriately. But, there are technical tools that can help you through this process so that, when you hit up against something that your organization doesn't have the expertise for, you're not on your own entirely.
And do you have any examples of how AI has been used to successfully mitigate against AI threats or anticipate them or protect against them?
Well, one of the things that I heard about last week, I was at a privacy and AI focused conference in DC. And one of the things that we heard a lot about was the use of AI for this sort of continuous monitoring of existing tools where, an organization has to look out for even the smallest changes in the way that a tool is issuing outputs. And it might not be, like I said, it's often small things that cascade quickly. It might be just a little bit of drift in the way that a model is acting. But
the well-known butterfly effect.
Right. And it's hard for individuals, within an organization who are busy with their actual everyday jobs to keep an eye out for little tiny drifts in the tool. They might think, oh, that's odd, but, kind of get back to what they were doing. And there are available some vendors who can help you spot those types of drift and just kind of, track the way the outputs are coming, I guess, provisioning against a framework that you set up and the expectations that you set up for the tool.
And how comfortable are your clients with these AI tools, and are they getting more so, or are they adjusting to it?
I think the trend that I've seen kind of across the board in every different context I've worked is that there's a real nervousness around implementing or kind of getting started, like almost opening Pandora's box here, because they can see how much risk there is and how great the opportunities are. And, in a lot of cases, organizations are so excited to implement AI that they don't really stop and do all of the governance steps. And then it kind of feels like taking a step back to implement these sorts of risk models, but that's not the case at all. Because I think that, starting where an organization is, even if it's not in a place of great awareness of the technical aspects of AI, or even if it's in an imperfect state of governance, just starting where you are is enough in a lot of cases to show regulators that, you're trying to faithfully implement this, that you're trying to stick to ethical guardrails. And it's a practice that becomes a lot easier as you do it. And so I think there's a hesitancy and sort of a feeling that people have to get their arms all the way around this before they can do it properly. And frankly, with AI and with emerging technology, it just really isn't the case that you can get your arms all the way around it. It's just kind of a thing that evolves as you learn to govern it. And so I think, I've been trying to encourage people to kind of take that jump and start trying to build out these frameworks that can help their organization gain that confidence and start using these tools more frequently and more effectively.
We've been talking about ethical guidelines and risks, but of course, what businesses want to know is how is AI going to make me more money and increase my profit margins? And do you have any stories about that? And I know that, in the popular media, it's like the debate seems to all be about how many people are they going to fire and save money that way. But that's not the only way that AI saves you money. It can increase the efficiency of your operations without firing anybody, right?
That's right. It can increase the efficiency and it can increase the scale of operations. So you might be able to serve more clients more quickly with the help of AI. I think the organizations tend to get ahead of themselves with the firing people thing because you are eventually going to need somebody to govern this, or you're going to be paying that same money in legal fees to somebody else to clean up the issues. But I think it's more of AI, I guess, in terms of thinking about how it can help your business, is more thinking about what it can help you scale. It's probably going to be things that you're already doing, but that you could do or you could do more quickly. And so I think or even aspects of your business that you aren't, as competent in, and AI might be able to help make that a little bit more manageable. But I don't think it's something to think about as like expanding in a whole new realm. It's more being able to do what your company already does well, more quickly or more efficiently, or a little bit more confidently.
And there's been all kinds of stuff in the media about young people have to learn AI skills. But I mean, what are AI skills? It's not one thing. I mean, it's AI skills in the maritime sphere. You have to know the maritime industry to know where you can use them. So it's not, you're not just going to bring in somebody who says, I know AI, but I don't know what the maritime industry is all about and expect to get good results out of them.
That's right. I do still think you have to learn the context in which you want to use the tool, or else you're not going to know what to do with it, as you said. And I've tried to encourage, I've seen on the other side of it, people who are very experienced in an industry and don't really know where to start with AI. And honestly, I say, don't start with your work. Start with something simple like, generate a recipe with the things I have in my fridge. Start somewhere, really attainable where you feel really confident, and you're going to know immediately if the output is complete garbage, because you're going to say, I'm never going to cook that. That looks gross. You can kind of start seeing where it does and doesn't work, and you can understand the limitations before you have to apply it at scale. And that's what I did, honestly, when I was overwhelmed by the concept of figuring out the law and the governance of AI, is I just kind of started playing with it a little bit to see what exactly it really does. And that's a great way to gain competence pretty quickly.
Are there going to be certifications that young people can earn, or is it just going to become part of every discipline almost?
I think both. There are certifications. The one that I've been working towards is International Association of Privacy Professionals. That's obviously an industry specific context, but there's an AI governance professional certification that you can get. And I know that in different industries there are different courses. There's a lot of courses available just on the basics of AI, a lot of ways to kind of get started there. But I do think it's correct that it also will become embedded in a lot of the technology. You know, when I was younger, it was just that sort of the dawn of social media, and that was something that felt very overwhelming to a lot of people. But you know, as I got into college and it became really ubiquitous, it just kind of became a natural skill for a lot of people. And now, you know, my generation's got kids on social media, right? So it's something that kind of picks up steam as it goes and becomes more natural, I think, the more people use it.
Of course, it could probably is going to become more invisible too, because we hear about companies importing it on our phones without telling us, and
Yeah.
it's lurking in the background all the time. What did I read? 45% of all internet content is supposed to be generated by bots now, or something.
It's a lot. But I do think, you know, what's really interesting to sort of bring it back to the risk governance work that we do is this work is unique because it does acknowledge the quickness with which technology can change and can kind of adapt to that. So as the technology moves away from just these baseline AI models and moves into more, more complex designs, the governance can adapt to it rather than being stuck with a set of, coming from the privacy and security space. A lot of times, 10 years ago, you have like a checklist of things you have to make sure you're accounting for. We're moving away from that and more into understanding the risk and being able to adapt to these technologies as they become more ubiquitous and as they morph into more complex designs, that you're able to sort of apply the same thinking and at least the same patterns for events that you can now, just based on the framework instead of based on like a strict set of legal rules or procedural rules.
You've been into the AI, cybersecurity. You've been dealing with these issues for how many years now in your legal practice?
Almost a decade.
What attracted you to those fields? Did you just, stray into them? And what in your background was most helpful in dealing with them? I mean, was it the technical stuff, or was it just the basic training in thinking and logic and asking the right questions that anybody can have without being an expert in AI or technical issues?
Yeah, it's the latter. So I came from a legal background. I was interested in constitutional law and these sort of governance frameworks that work, for a nation. And I started applying them in a smaller scale with privacy, thinking about, the impacts that technology has on individuals, and that kind of morphed into the AI governance space. But I just see a lot of opportunity for people who have different backgrounds and different ways of thinking about issues to apply their knowledge in this area. And it's a lot more interesting to me to be able to work with people in different functions and to learn about the technical side and to learn about the actual operational side and to bring together all of those perspectives. I think we're moving away from more sort of industry silos and people working in their very specific capacity and working together towards these types of issues. And so that was what appealed to me. And it's held up, a decade later. I'm still learning new things every day. And so that's what interested me about this particular area.
Would you tell a young person, whether training to be a lawyer or not, but having to navigate this world of AI, what kinds of things would you recommend they take in college, even if it's out of their curriculum or in a training program, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to have sort of basic technical skills, and you can get those. I'm sure at this point, basic AI use is probably embedded in regular sort of computer science types of courses. But I think that, as we were talking about earlier, you don't have to dive 100% into just understanding the technical side of this. I think pursue the courses that are interesting to you, and you can then sort of overlay your technical knowledge into that space. I think that AI is something that is going to be prevalent no matter what direction you go. You could be a writer, you could be a lawyer, you could be a physical therapist like my husband is, and still use AI on a day-to-day basis. So I don't think that there's any need to be overly specific about, courses in college or anything like that. I think just having that sort of basic understanding is a helpful place to start, and you can kind of build that out as you get a sense of what you like doing.
Is there anything I should be asking you about that I haven't, about your practice or AI in the maritime sphere, or anything else that you want to talk about?
I mean, I think just something that I like to emphasize is that, AI is often framed, just because it is a big technological advancement, as the sort of tech revolution. In practice, AI is a tool. It's more of an operational challenge. Just kind of have to adapt to what tool we're working with now. It's not, it's not the telephone, it's not the TV, it's not the internet, it's another new thing. And we can still apply our same sort of ethical instincts and our same governance instincts to new technologies. I think the organizations that are successful with AI won't just have better tools. I think they'll have better, more strategic discipline around how those tools are used, and just being thoughtful about how you're integrating this technology is, I think, more important to me than anything else. So.
Michelle, I can't think of anything else to ask you unless you have more stories to share about how this works in the, with particular clients. Again, not revealing anything specific, but.
No, I'm happy with. I don't have any more questions to ask you. That means I've answered everything that you want to know. And I'll.
Well, thanks so much, and I hope we can talk again.